Welcome to this new book news reading celebrating writers whose books were published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. We have programs for writers, readers, and storytellers, and I'd like to invite you to a food for thought book discussion on The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, Wednesday, February 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. More information at lityoungstown.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm so pleased to feature these three poets today, and congratulations to them on their publications. We'll follow this evening's readings with a conversation about these new books. Gustavo Hernandez is the author of the micro-chapbook Form His Arms, published by Ghost City Press. He was born in Jalisco, Mexico, and lives in Southern California. His new book is Flower Grand First, published by Moontide Press. Welcome, Gustavo.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Karen. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today. I'll be reading from Flower Grand First. It's out March 22nd on Moontide, and it looks like this, except it won't have this bar here when it comes out. The first poem I'm going to read is called Refugio, and it is about my grandmother. In the early morning, there's a sweetness in the white smoke rising from our houses. It is December, and the night mist has left behind its small complications. They are water on dry corn stalks. It is everywhere. Rooster feather, tractor wheel, the largest nativity scene in El Rancho where even the devil is gold-flaked. This is and isn't memory, because I'm trying to tell you of a time when only my grandmother was left to walk across our patio. Years after she stomped across it to undo the rusty deadbolt to the room my sister had locked me in. Years after she guided my hands across it to wash up in my mom's lavadero. After we were all gone, living in el norte. No, y yo pa qué voy? ¿Y quién va a echarle agua a la salia, o a la rayán, o a las rosas y a los aretes? I am filling in words now, too. See, I am trying to make sense of it for you, for us. Because on this side, things grow on their own, whether someone goes or stays. I'm trying to make this okay for you. Show you I can still feel her missing me. In this body, no shirt in the stainless steel kitchen, hairy chest and the crow's feet, my glasses. I'm trying to show you there's never a day when the hills don't unfold in light and dew and smoke. The next poem I'm going to read is called Santa Ana, 4th grade. Is that the fairy? Our voices all squeak, so this question isn't about that. Someone's been paying attention, and once again, I am named before I have understood myself. Someone has discovered me, a girl who is the cousin of a boy I thought and called my friend, a boy who's named himself White Trash because he is among us. Someone has discovered me chaining the clovered horizon to garland. They've seen the crushed jacaranda paste on my palms. So this is the spot where I branch out in purple. Here, where the popsicle melts its red and its blue, this one strip, heat waves rippling into the invisible, asphalt markings leading up to them like a parable to temptation. So this book is divided into 3 sections. The first section deals more with childhood, although it goes back and forth, but there's more of an emphasis on childhood and coming to be in this country. This poem is about my sister, and it's called Carmen. The 4 walls of the Setco Plastics factory were built around my sister's name, its red lip, its pride, its dark hair pulled up to where she couldn't see it. Her words were sifted through a wall of exhaust fans, lost as a second shift pushed the city to the edges of a new cycle. The light again drained from flower, from grand, from first. On most nights, she and I met in the artificial glow of our television, belts of stars soaked into the gold leg scrolls of telenovela chairs. I was kept awake by chaining meaning to other manufactured sounds, fat syllables of my name maneuvering through lean, strong foreign words. There was one night in July where a mute girl in the novela willed the words back to her mouth to tell Arturo Peniche that his fiancé had been a terrible villain. I told you she'd get her voice back. Carmen's tone was tempered flat through repetition, bottles and plastic cereal containers evenly spaced on a conveyor belt. She motioned for me to join her at the open front door. From the street, she was fading red lipstick. I was in electric blue garage sale t-shirt. The moon played with the overgrown ficus. June bugs spun around a porch light, but we looked past them and dreamt a far-off language. This next poem is called Formas Sagradas. To a child, the Virgen is returned mechanized over the pitayas in the countryside, night masses of steel braids and copper manteaus over at Totonilco and its ruby wealth, breathing dahlia blossoms from the vent in their joints, magnetized segments hovering warm sighs away from each other. Circles of stars around their fingers raised in benediction, these ticking brass mothers leak milk, bake bread, keep watch over and irrigate the wasana fields. Bone-white face panels shift, crescent, bullhorn new to full, to illuminate the way for children herding cattle. How these whirring monoliths return us to the old way, synthesized blessings over the hands of old men offering papayas and mangos de los de antes. To a child, these mothers are the black mist of manufactured thunderclouds, purifying veins, disarming men, healers of the grief of widows and the childless. How their knees slowly trail down the illuminated walkways of their templos, paying back mandas, the sick injected to health, the work remunerated, the land kept. Crying children convince their reluctant parents to enter, to not ever feel afraid. These mothers are the same as ever. Call to them. This next poem is called I'm Aware I'll Grow Old. I'm aware I'll grow old like my mother's father and her brothers, proud, ruddy men of the plains, copper brown hair seeding to white in tight-lipped lines, not without a fight. The way my mother defended what was theirs, their property, while my father worked up north, her Holy Spirit fire. Those parcels of ritual anger I feel steaming in me too. Honor of the landowner, sufficiency of cattle rancher, bronze button charro of the high plain with a magical control of twirling lassos. Even with all that in the mirror, Father, when you died, I only wished for your humble hands in fields of lettuce, your raw fingers and steel beams, broad arm bracing a machine to cut into the growing fennel, that navigating brown core, steering heart, pushing blood, moving limb, lungs in melody, still whistling of goodwill and of fair labor. This next poem is called Clapboard. In second grade, I winged definitions because I couldn't find a dictionary among the hand-me-downs people left in the house we moved into. I described a wallet best I could. The loose crease, the torn corners, fruit only shapes and colors absent continents of origin. The house on Spruce, with its 2 rooms for 7 people, never promised more than what it first contained, but taught us to create space. Knees on the green carpet with a notebook split open on the edge of a mattress, prayer and sewing taken up at the kitchen table, rough shingles, drumming rain gutters. In a way, a house never stops protecting us. I can still see its lamp shorting out, and my family walking in the dark, feeling our way around, doing pretty well. This next poem is from the middle section of the book. It's called Along the 15 near Baker. Along the 15 near Baker, a radio signal travels down a small hill, carried on the winking quartz and granite. It plays a repeating segment about the Mojave, cinder cones, rattlers, the importance of cool water, the steady voice, the reminder to be careful. I remind myself of this drive with someone else. He put his left hand on my knee and wondered aloud if a Joshua tree could survive in our backyard, so far south. One more thing we might try to keep alive. Just like you and I, we didn't stop for the sand in the Mojave. Just like us, we didn't need to talk so much. I mentioned these small things to you, but you're sleeping, warm under your own weight, breathing out your own significance. I'm going to read two more poems. Two more poems. This one is called Aliso Creek Rest Stop, I-5 southbound. We get a good, honest view of California here, everything it is. Dry shift dress of a palm tree, concrete and a metal railing, tourist sign, and the spin on the paths the friars plowed up the coast. The things we leave forever on its concrete benches, under the eucalyptus of its way stations. Cars and bodies once full and warm and comfortable. Stretches of fathers walking toward their children, seeing them now as they always have, disillusioned and remarkable. Here is summer in a state that can't see the full mass of its own body. Here is the talk of home, food, and future that's used to tie its hills to sheaf. And this last poem is one of my favorite poems. I think maybe my favorite poem I've ever written, and it's called The Hereafter. The hereafter is like everything around me, built by my father. His feet in wood frames full of mud and straw, comically slowed down by that strange small dog who ran ahead to be his companion. Of course, there are bean sprouts growing below the corn stalks, fields of wild tuberose, and the boulder ledges of our river. The night filled with oil lamp bright, noon songs incomplete without some light radio static. It will always be Jalisco. I will just go out and say it. Say that the eyes of those who are mine adjust not to an ascent as much as a return. After all of our years, we finally set out toward the right horizon. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. Cynthia Atkins is the author of Psyche's Weathers, and in the event of full disclosure, her work has appeared in numerous journals, including Alaska Quarterly Review, Bomb, Cleaver Magazine, Diode, Florida Review, Green Mountains Review, Rust and Moth, North American Review, Seneca Review, Thrush, Tinderbox, and Verse Daily. Her new book is Still Life with God, published by St. Julian Press. Welcome, Cynthia. Cynthia, you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't do that.
Is that better? Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Lit Youngstown, for gathering us poets social distancing and bringing us together. Gustavo and I were trying to read together before COVID. So thanks for bringing us together. It's kind of special that you made that so easy. And Darren, I've admired your work for so long. So it's really nice to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you all for coming. I'm reading from Still Life with God. I like to tell you that the cover art is a batik artist by the name of Lisa Telling Kattenbraker. I really loved her work, and it was a beautiful marriage, I think, with what I was doing with my book. So I was really glad to find it. This first poem, I thought I'd start with something, I guess maybe because it's the Super Bowl, a little bit lighter. It's a love poem. It was a request from my son, who was never very into poetry until he hung out with this girl who was. It's amazing how that can tender the interest. So he became interested in poetry and the fact that his mother was a poet. And he asked me to write this poem for Morgan's birthday, which was the hardest assignment I think I was ever given. And my son, who was taking Latin at the time, helped me name it. It's called Proba Vita, which means the cycles of life in Latin. Proba Vita. Because it's a snapshot of spring, a bitten plum is open on a table like a ripe mouth, next to a girl reading a book from the library, stamped return. Call off the spine-sniffing dogs of dust, because fingers browse the card catalog of words, resisting arrest or rhyme. Because my house is empty as a theater after everyone goes home. Lights dim on the dusty, long tongue of the interior aisle. Because the river is silent and wise as those prophets who drank whiskey by the railroad track. Because my womb is lined in taffeta, torn dress from a prom night where I'm still looking for a line from a song. Left it in a shoe, in the closet where I hid from my sister holding a cap gun, my cheek brushing sleeve cuffs and the essence of my parents. Because my son's girlfriend is reading this poem, the universe shifts to the other foot. Because the river keeps moving and holds so many door keys, shoes, tin cans, gills of fish. We're kept out as if God or whoever is teaching us about boundaries. No matter what, doors compel us to knock. Skirts hold hems and pockets. Even the goalpost finds a shadow and stays just a hair over the line from the home team. Because flowers are here to serve up the hard facts. Petals are only for show or blush. Because the girl with long hair is reading a book. Beyond the grassy margins, a boy is sailing a paper airplane into the vast stratosphere of science and love. This next poem deals with the theme of domestic violence, somewhat rampant in our culture, hidden. A lot of the themes in my book deal with mental health. And in this third book, somewhat the mental health of the culture at large. My second book was dealing more personally with family and mental health. And I'm looking at the cultural malaise and issues we have yet to deal with. This is called My Body is a Vessel. My body is a vessel of dictation, forever told what not to do, always under investigation, with fingerprints on the banisters, pocks and dents on the wood tableau. My body's invisible, but listen hard. You'll hear the gut rankle and the refrigerator in the apartment below, where the moans of a woman are being twisted and squashed like a spent cigarette. My body has been burned to Eden and back. It has been sent to endless zip codes and put through each government test like a desk clerk smile of dread. My body has flirted, endured the gaze, lost the gaze, caught between the manly battlefield of wills. My body worked hard at being anonymous, a paperclip, harder at being lonely. Under my body's floor, a woman irons the shirt her body will wear to be beaten and torn and entered. My body listens to him crack a beer after. Through the floorboards, past the humming appliances, in my body like a dormant pebble stuck in a shoe. Long ago, this body doodled on an unmade bed, listened for a tooth fairy with nicotine on her breath. This body worried for the body of her mother, getting bruised under the lintel in a doorway. A tooth knocked out. These limbs hear too much, fasten to the shade of trees. on tender hooks. Some of the ways in which God is a big topic, and of course I picked the biggest topic to write about. But what I tried to do in this book is bring God down to our world that's filled with social media and the internet. And how does this spiritual life fit in, is my question in the book. I don't know that I ever answer it, but how does this life fit in to this world that we're living in now, which is so filled with people and so many, I mean, we're plugged in so many orifices, unlike the writing life I used to know, and I'm old enough to remember pre-internet. So a lot of this book has God in the title, and God is naming various objects. So this is called God is a Medicine Cabinet. Swig of my wine. Thanks. God is a medicine cabinet. This is egregious. The mind's parlor is being wooed before breakfast, even before hitting the sticky gymnasium floor. The keys to your ethos held accountable in a drowning pool of munitions, swerving on the slick road like mood hoodlums on the lam. You're offered a cigarette on the front lines to come back and report on the internal conflict. Yes, every day is triage. You are the wedge between East and West. You are someone else's war chest. The pharmacist's widow sanctioned pills like beads on a rosary. Every day, you are a cloud held up by toothpicks. Battle weary and bootlegged to the nth. Every suitcase holds crimped labels implying you have filled out many papers and forms. You've crossed boundary lines while red sirens howl with the dogs. On 2 feet, you landed here. A cotton knoll down a lane of pretend. That moment when, as a kid, you learned how to swallow and let go. I am going to read a little poem that I was asked to write for an anthology called The Eloquent Poem, and it's a book by Persea, an anthology that used as a textbook poets writing in different forms. So each part of the book is a great book to teach from, actually. There's many great poets in there using various different forms. And I'm writing an epistle here. It's kind of an epistle and an ars poetica. And it's called Dear Art. Dear Art, flashpoint. I was put to bed last night with your railroad kiss. I woke with a ladder in my mouth. tropes of people climbing out in a death choke. Your tawdry laundry line of images blowing manic through needling wind. I was always in earshot, but you were first to leave the party. A hard lullaby. I feared you were household word in a ghost town. My silence was torrential, a bombshell, a swamp of worms reeling into words, into cordial song. In debt and spent, yours truly, truly yours. I'm going to end with, two more poems, and one is a tribute to my tribute to Prince. The night he died, I think we were all feeling this ubiquitous sense of loss and a connection to something larger than us, the way that somebody like a rock star like Prince or Bowie connects us in a way and makes us all feel very connected. Isn't it strange that both Prince and Bowie died right after Trump was elected? I think they decided it was time to check out. Times were too dark. So anyway, I took a drive that night that Prince died. There's a little laundromat in my town, and I saw this woman inside just kind of folding laundry, and I felt very connected to her. Just watching her from my car, and feeling this loss of Prince, and thinking of life. A goddess in purple rain. Behind glass, a lady is lit up inside the laundromat. She's folding sheets, pink curlers of Baroque in her hair, singing and creasing a t-shirt with sequins. Her arms and hips stretch out to a body of air. The room filling with sound. And I am humming inside her, inside her body, burning for shelter from the abyss of my alone. Rounding a corner in my car, I am passing by, hearing Purple Rain on the radio. I can almost taste the sweat on the brow of the boy I danced with so many years ago. It tasted like dry toast or the brunt of hurting. Listen to the sky imploring, come as you are, alone to the last concert, to light matches in a spellbound crowd. Remorse of loving a rock star we can never own. And now the lady in the laundromat is swaying, and I am swaying with her from my car. Maybe she is dancing with her son, going off to boot camp or the ends of the earth. I'm thinking of my son at 3, standing on the kitchen table in a wet diaper, banging music from a wooden spoon. This is that concert where you lit a match to your own bag of wounds. You felt like you belonged, a citizen, alive as a hackle of girls at the May prom. Look at the moon, hanging like a shoe to throw its heel of light on the page or an empty field. We are all in the body of this night, cogent as a judge who loves the law. The lady in the laundromat carries the load to her car, unpins her hair. I don't want to be alone tonight. The stars allow me to follow her. We are passing the town. Rooftops are hunkering down to sing lullabies to the young. And the night is a stranger touching my sleeve. Thank you. Thank you all tonight for coming. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Darren C. Demaree is the author of 14 poetry collections. He's the recipient of a 2018 Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award, the Louise Bogan Award from Trio House Press, and the Nancy Dew Taylor Award from Emrys Journal. His new book is Unfinished Murder Ballads, published by Backlash Press. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you. And thank you to our first 2 readers tonight. You folks were incredible. I appreciate it. Now I'm ready to go. I'm all warmed up thanks to you guys. So Unfinished Murder Ballads was sort of a challenge book for me. It is very different than anything I've ever written purposefully. It's very different than what my natural poetic voice is. If anyone's ever read any of the Emily poems, that's sort of my default setting. But I like to challenge myself to try to write very different things from time to time. And Backlash was nice enough to take a chance on a book like that. So I spent a lot of time studying the old murder ballads, both the old Irish songs, sort of the revenge stories, things like that. And I became fascinated not with the whole refrain and lyric of them, or even necessarily the murders that took place, but the way that the scenes came together, the way the emotions would take over, almost the landscape that these violent acts would take place. Because for a book that's called Unfinished Murder Ballads, there's almost no graphic violence in the book at all. I was just much more fascinated with the idea of the tradition and how I could take and move it different places and challenge myself to do that. So I'm going to read 7 or 8 from this tonight. And then I'm very excited to get to talk poetry. We don't get to talk poetry that often. It's always a good thing. So this is called That Was Fairly Clear. The flowers grew around the sketch of the bird that was pasted over the face of the boy that served as coal for the whole display. He paid for the minerals of each consciousness. He wanted to lose every layer of thought. He had post-burial goals. They all do. The artists that forget about the rain that comes with the storm. They embrace the thunder. They love that they are lightning. They always forget about what a real flood can do to a corpse that no one is willing to protect. The oldest friends in Ohio settle all of their old grudges. Cancered, aided by the wind, their skin was free of every other love, and what was left for them had nothing left to give. Two old men that had told each other to go to hell 100 times over 70 years, had meant it every time, and had apologized half of the time, shared a porch, and hatched a plan to get drunk one last time, together, to get functionally insane, to have those minds make love to the cancer inside of them, and to erupt with the two pistols they were keeping at the bottom of the cooler. Both men got real drunk. Both men loaded a pistol. Both men knew of the infidelity, that one of the men had slept with the other's wife 45 years ago, and it was that man that wanted one last pull of whiskey before they shot each other. He always did get what he wanted. He almost always got what he wanted. Rubber tied. They both wanted the butterfly of the bird to hold steady in the window, but those bullets pierced more than the simple skin. Already past the body on the hardwood floor, he picked up the shattered glass slowly, admiring the feathers that still floated in the air. The possibility for great beauty still remained, and it would take a terrific deal of effort to move past the visual of his gloves wrapped around the headless being he so admired. He wondered if birds carried names with them. He wondered if this bird had ever killed another bird. Did it say the name of that soon to be no more? Why had he said her name before he shot her straight through her snap shirt? He kept 4 feathers. One of the best parts of trying to put together a book that has a place that doesn't begin in you is the fun part of getting to create narrative, getting to make things up. That's one of the best parts of getting to write poetry, is sometimes you are telling the absolute truth with a lie, and sometimes you're just obfuscating and entertaining a little bit. And sometimes you get to actually say the truth that means something to you, and it's your job as a poet to pick and choose when you get to do that. So this is one of the only things in this book that has any grain of truth in it. I was in Texas, and there were these beautiful purple flowers behind a gas station, and I asked about it, and I don't know if the guy was making a joke, just I didn't have the right accent, or he was trying to make a point, but he claimed that horses were buried behind it. And thus I got a poem called Lilac Horses. Appointed to hesitate, we have pushed our animals to threaten the unsteady lines of the land once too often. Once on a hillside in Texas, I asked the manager of a gas station why there were so many lovely purple flowers growing a dozen or so yards behind the restroom outliers. He said they used to bury horses there when they were allowed to do such things. He said his grandmother always told him that horse flesh gave special gifts to the flora. I told him I thought it was weird that she believed that. It feels monstrous, I said. No shit, he responded. And with that, one of us decided to keep the other's change. An argument erupts over the naming of flowers. There were 2 women, one of them old, one of them young, and together they grew the most beautiful flowers in the whole of No County. They lived in the dirt, shared the dirt with each other, and saved the best of it for their floral children. It was a quiet, long love. One day, instead of singing, the older woman rattled off all of the names she had given to each of the flowers. They were named after her dead husband, her children that had moved far away, her grandchildren that rarely visited, and her brothers and sisters she had lost track of decades ago. Without knowing, she was renaming the flowers the girl had already blessed with personal monikers. She managed to trample the spirit of the garden. And maybe that would have been fine, but the girl had arrived soon after her to burn every root she had named after her boyfriend. All anyone saw was the fire growing taller than the fence line. After that, there were only accusations. All of the names had been used up. Whenever I think I'm being too clever, I write a very short poem. So there are a few of those in this book. And this one I still think is clever, so I still read it. A generous sample of enlightenment. He killed 3 men to prove he was the lightning, and they were simply an invention of their times. I've got the last 2 I'm going to read are the last 2 in the book. And I did a online launch for this book at Secret Studio here in Columbus. And these 2 were requested to make sure that I finished the reading with. So now whenever I get a chance to read this book, I like to finish with these 2. It makes sense. They are the best in the book. So we'll go with these to finish. The girl was a raspberry. Killing a mile of steam at a time, the fog pouring like the best lies that can trace the valley with a plastic bag tenderness. And that girl, I tell you, she was a raspberry. She had said she had real skin, but the world around her could only be swallowed, never chewed, without leaving moments of terror around the mouths of all the boys she called to. I know her fatalities talked more without the days counting them. And I also know her tight intentions could be like seeds beginning to grow underneath a molar. No man had straight teeth after he met her. Part of that was because they were valley people. Part of that was that she couldn't lay down with any of them without a large tree branch within her thick arm's reach. Someone who bought a copy of the book did the math on the violence in the book. And really, it's just a bunch of dudes getting killed is what happens in the book. That's all right. The last poem is called Caribou. Rush the darkness. Bend your head down. Allow your crown to plunge through the urgency. If there really was a person there, will it ever matter to you? It should, but then again, it isn't always about should. There are whole nations that have been dug up. They were faithful, intent on good, and it took only one ambition to render their poignancy moot. Sometimes you are in a forest of people. Sometimes those people carry no seed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. That was fantastic. Gustavo, Cynthia, thank you. What a great reading. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I was wondering if you would kick us off, Gustavo.
Gladly. So my question is for either Darren or Cynthia. And this is, I can't take credit for the question. I heard Lauren Camp ask this question at one of your readings, Karen, and it just stuck with me. And I'm probably going to paraphrase it badly, but did each of you go into this collection with any questions that you wanted answered?
I'll start. Well, of course, I went seeking God or questions about God, questions about my faith and what I believed, because I don't know. And I wrote the book, yes, questioning everything. And I don't think I found the answer. I kept trying to write the poem that would give me the answer. And I don't think I got there, but I think that's why we write poems, to question. I don't think we really want answers, do we? That's boring. So that's what I'm seeking, yeah, questions.
Yeah, I think if you're writing a book that you consider to be a purposeful challenge, I'm a almost other than you know, some spankings as a child. I was I have lived in a completely non-violent world, but I was fascinated by the increase of violence in our world now, and trying to place myself in it. I wanted to find something about it that was interesting in this sort of old story structure of it. And murder ballads are almost always revenge stories, and almost always people trying to get something they want that someone else has, and things like that. And so I don't think I ever found an answer of how myself, a nonviolent person, exists in this violent world. But I found little snapshots of things that were interesting to me, that I think illuminated some of the pettiness of violence. Sometimes it is just that someone named a flower something different than you named it. Sometimes it is a revenge story, and sometimes it's cruel for no reason at all. The poem I read about the horses being buried, you know, if you think about racetracks, if you think about the way people treat livestock sometimes, if you think about people that beat dogs, it's so cruel and unusual to have that result in a beauty that's strange. Was interesting to me. But again, it's a question that I don't think I could answer. But I found interesting answers regardless, even if it didn't answer the initial question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gustavo, I wanted to ask you, because Cynthia, I'd read your books before, and this was the first book of Gustavo's that I'd read. And it felt different than your Ghost City micro-chap. When it felt like you were being asked the question, show me how you create a bloom in your book, in the new one. And the point that you kept trying to make was, we are the bloom. Like, you want me to teach you how to construct a bloom for your life? No, 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 no. Look at me. Look at my people. Look at my family. We are the bloom. Was that something you were thinking about in the context of this book?
Thank you for that question. That's really insightful. And yes, I think that being someone who is kind of a product of two different cultures. I mean, I came here with my family when I was 6 to the United States, but our home here in the U.S. was not. It felt like it was not, and it's still to this day. I go to my mom's house, the house where I grew up, and it doesn't feel like it's here. Like, as soon as you step into that house, it's like you're in Jalisco again, right? And the kids, we've sort of disrupted that a little bit, just because, you know, you sometimes do, but not purposely. But anyway, yes. So I think of myself as like something like a bloom, right? Like, and it's colorful. It's something that, I mean, my goodness, like, I grew up listening to like norteñas and rancheras at home, and I am a huge fan of alternative rock. Like, I grew up in the 90s, and, you know, so those things, it's just, they come together and they create something. Just like, you know, I'm no scientist, but just like, you know, a bloom, there are chemicals, there are processes that make this beautiful thing. And I think all of us, like, we take our influences and, you know, we bloom. So yeah, that was definitely on my mind when I wrote the book.
That was really my favorite part of that book. Was it felt like you were being probed to show the part of you that might be considered beautiful, and your rejection of that idea that only a part of you is beautiful. That, no, all of these things, this whole thing that comes together to create Gustavo, to create your art, There's not a bit of that you leave behind. You show everyone everything, and at the end you get sort of overwhelmed by. And you can tell, by the way, when you read those poems. We were talking before this all started, and when you start reading those poems, the joy starts to like pop in your face. Your cheeks get bigger. It's fantastic, right? So that if you can accomplish that in a book of poetry, if you can supersede where all those ingredients come from to become something bigger, then that's a real accomplishment. And Cynthia, you in your book, the vantage point, as soon as you invoke the word God in a title of poetry, thinks that it's going to be some sort of reverential thing. And as Gustavo is lifting up this world to show people, you have sort of grabbed God by the scruff of the neck and brought him down, the identity all down to us, and said, you are going to experience God in the way that I experience. And it is with real people, real lives. And even the poem you read about the medicine cabinet, right? There are people that find new joys or pleasure or saving in modern medicine the same way that they would expect to from God. And so you bring them into those small spaces. And I think that's why your book works as well as it does.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I got excited.
Well, can I ask you guys where do you see the I in your poems landing? I know, like Darren, you use a lot of voices and persona, and you're always taking on different identities, and that seems to be part of your interest, is probing those identities and seeing who these people are. And by contrast, Gustavo is writing about a very personal, familial, childhood, family, traditions. So I'm wondering from both of you how that I, sometimes personally for me, writing from a different perspective allows me to be more naked and honest than from my own I, writing from a different persona. So just would love to hear from both of you how you see this I in your poems. I. Darren?
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Oh, well, especially in this book, this was one purposefully that has no I in it. There's only a few things in it that actually happened to me, and they were not written the same way in the book. So I think when you're exploring when you're writing personal poetry, like I've got a book called So Clearly Beautiful, and it's poems about my kids, or any of the Emily poems or things like that. It can function, and you can use it different ways. The use of I implies that I'm going to tell you the truth, and that's when you get to mess with it. And that's when you can be more inventive with the structure of I. In this book, it was a completely alien thing from me as a person. So I imagine Gustavo has more important things to say about I in terms of his.
Well, so for me, I actually, when I started writing, I thought that I wanted to write short fiction. And so I took, some creative writing classes and started out on that path, and found that I could not take myself out of those stories. It was like every story was just so thinly veiled that, I mean, it was like an autobiography. And so at some point, I just decided not to resist that, and my poems are all extremely personal. And so when people, sometimes you try to be careful when you say, oh, the speaker, and of course that is a good thing to do. But like for me, I mean, this book is about who I am. Like, this is an extremely personal book. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know how to write another way. Basically, that's yet. I don't know, maybe someday, but right now, I can't. And Darren, when I was reading your book, immediately when I started reading it, it called to mind, there's this album called Murder, Misery, and Then Goodnight by Kristen Hirsch,
Okay.
who was the lead singer of Throwing Muses. And she recorded this album of Appalachian folk songs that her grandmother or parents sang to her when she was a kid. She says at a certain point she realized, oh my God, like these are so violent. Like, why would you sing these to a child, right? So she recorded this album of those songs, and it's brilliant. So when I read your book, immediately, like my mind went there. But when I read that Lilac Horses poem, I was like, oh, there he is. There's Darren. Like immediately when I read that poem, I was
You
like,
caught me.
yeah. I was like, there he is. I know that guy. So yeah, that's just a little something I wanted to share.
Yeah, it's because you work so hard to find that voice that you're talking about, the one that is personal, that has some truth in it, and you're trying to bring the reader along. And there's so much work to be done to get to that place that you want to stay in it as long as possible. And I found myself getting uncomfortable in that place. So I always come back to write a few poems in what is the most Darren possible voice, and then I purposefully go somewhere else, just for the challenge of it, because I don't want to get bored, and I don't want folks that read my books to get bored. To try to find different avenues and different things to be curious about. So I'll do research books. I did a book about Ray Mancini accidentally killing Duk Koo Kim in the title fight that was on national television. We're talking about the Super Bowl. They had this bout on national television, and a man died. You find different curiosities and things to study, and it's never going to be distilled through you every time. But you're right. Even in a book that is completely not about me, I showed up a couple times.
Well, that seems like a wonderful place to end, although I would love to keep this conversation going. But I just want to thank you all so very much. What a wonderful evening. And I wish you all the best of luck with these wonderful books and good health and every other good thing. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lit Youngstown. Thank you, Gustavo.